At the risk of going full groiper here and getting banned, I just found this really interesting. This came across my Facebook feed. This is an ad put out by the Bernie Sanders campaign. So this is like official from his campaign. And this is from an organization called Jews for Bernie. And I won't show the whole video, but you will be able to hear it. I'm not all fancy here. Maybe I'll hold the phone just a little bit, but here we go.
I think it's so important that Jews come together for Bernie because he is living our Jewish values. It hurts so badly when people try to erase Bernie's Jewish identity because it looks a lot like mine.
Okay, so that's kind of interesting. I'm going to pause it and give a little comments here. She seems really upset about Bernie's Jewish identity being, I don't know, disappeared or vanished, covered up, and I'm not sure what she could possibly mean by that. He's been openly Jewish. Everyone knows he's Jewish. No one's denied he's Jewish. He's obviously not Orthodox. He doesn't wear the garb, but he's a New York Jew. And what I also think was kind of interesting here, she doesn't look, she doesn't dress Jewish herself. She looks like a normal American. I wonder, I mean, she seems really broken up about this. It's really touching her, and that's fine. I mean, if you have a Jewish identity, that's whatever, that's your thing. But I wonder if she would like feel this way if somebody accused Bernie of covering up his American identity. If someone said his American identity was being erased, does she identify as an American? And if she does it to some extent, I'm sure it means she does it to some extent, but I wonder if she would break out in tears if she saw someone's American identity getting wiped out. And I'm not saying that as a patriot in the sense of like she should value her American identity more. That's the most important thing, because I don't agree with that necessarily. There's plenty of people who have identities that supersede their American identity. Maybe they're with their family, with their church. Uh, but it's interesting here because I think it's pretty clear that well, at least it's very likely that she values her Jewish identity above that, which is fascinating in the context of this is a reason to support someone to be the head of the United States government, right? That somebody who heads the United States government, you favor him because of an identity that supersedes his American identity, right? So he's not an anarchist libertarian. He's not a breakaway Mormon or even a religious Hasidic Jew who wants to do the Hasidic Jew thing on their own terms. He wants to head the United States government, and uh, yet it seems like to you his Jewish identity should be paramount. And again, I don't think that she would get that emotional if somebody tried to cover up their American identity. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's the impression. So let's continue.
Bernie embodies to me everything that a Jew should be. Cares about the others, cares about the poor. He's human, and I just hope to God he wins.
He's human, and he hopes to God he wins. I assume everyone's human, but apparently, I mean, everyone's human, but this is a reason for supporting Bernie. So is he more human than the other candidates? This is humanity trump other candidates? I mean, in fact, we're all Homo sapiens here, or at least I think we're all Homo sapiens here, but maybe not. Continue.
Two parts of Judaism that have really had a deep impact on me, and one is tzedakah, which is justice, and tikkun olam, repairing the world. Both.
So justice, or I think what she actually means is socialism, right? What is the definition of justice? This is not given. And healing the world. So this is the self within the self-image of Jews, that they are out there to heal the world. It's not just Jews. I would say lots of religious sects kind of have this, and Americans also do, the American exceptionalism. But she's not talking about American exceptionalism. She's not saying that her identity as an American makes her want to make the world a better place. She's saying that her identity as a Jew is what makes her want to have the world be a better place, and a better place as defined by her conception of justice, which she doesn't elaborate here, but she's supporting Bernie Sanders, so we can make certain assumptions about that, what that is, and it's certainly not what most Americans think.
Those values have really been instilled in me, and
that's another thing, that these values have been instilled in her. So one of the things that many cultures do, again, not just Jews, is they inculcate their young culturally to have certain values. We all do this. So in the Chinese, filial piety, you have to venerate your your family, your elders, especially your father, to the point of near worship. Like you pray to them, animism, you have to do whatever they want. That's instilled in you. And she has Jewish values instilled in her. Now, she looks like an American. She's not wearing traditional Hasidic garb, uh, but and she doesn't speak with an accent or anything like that. She doesn't have a nasally voice or whatever. But she's self-describing that she's been instilled with the Jewish values. Right now, this is a commercial for Jews for Bernie, but does she go around and tell everyone, hey, my Judaism informs my values? And let me describe what those Jewish values are, just so you know what my biases are. I wonder if she does that.
I see them clearly in Bernie's policies.
To see the first Jewish American president would be a historic first. The value of having Bernie Sanders as the first Jewish president is the same reason that Bernie Sanders would be a great leader for so many other communities, which is he's going to stand up to the threats not just of Trump, but of white nationalism and of racism and hate.
Right, so he stands against racism. Oh, by the way, I happened to pause it right on a lovely shot of everyone's favorite former ANCAP, the disgusting troll. What's his name? Chris Cantwell. Yeah, there he is. So, yeah, so Bernie would be, since he's Jewish, he's great for everybody because he's Jewish. That's why they're supporting him. Jewish leadership is good for everyone, and they stand against hate. Unless that hate's against groups that oppose the Jews, I guess. So let's continue.
As a young Jewish person, the rise of such a historic political figure like yourself is awe-inspiring. What does your Jewish identity mean to you, and why would it be significant for you to be the first Jewish president in the history of our nation?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, again, so what's your Jewish identity? So what's his American identity? Right? If he's going to be the president of the United States, what's his American identity? Why is his Jewish identity so important? They're all voting for him because of his Jewish identity, his Jewish identity, his Jewish identity. So people bring up this question of divided loyalties, and they get, you get shot down like that's racist or anti-Semitic or whatever. But it's clear that they have this distinct identity. They're not just. They don't define Jewish identity as it means the same thing as everything else. It's homogenous. It's all encompassing with everyone. No, there is a distinct Jewish identity that they identify with that is exclusive to non-Jews, and this is the defining trait of Bernie Sanders in their eyes, and that's the defining trait probably in their eyes too, right? If they're voting for him based on that. I doubt that they have something else that they value higher, because then they would be voting for him. Now, this next part's funny too.
I can remember very vividly as a kid looking at picture books about what happened in the Holocaust.
Okay, so his connection to the Holocaust, as he relates when he gets asked about it, is that he was looking at picture books as a kid. Okay, I have that connection to the Holocaust then. I looked at picture books when I was a kid. All right, so this connection is now he'll go on. There's a family connection there, but it's like that's his first come up. I saw picture books. I read about it, history books. Yeah, sure did we all.
As it happens, my father's family was wiped out by Hitler. My brother and I and our wives went to Poland, to the town that he was born in. He fled terrible poverty and anti-Semitism. And they took us to a place where the Nazis.
Yeah, so he fled terrible poverty and anti-Semitism from Poland. He obviously didn't flee Poland after the war started, or it's very unlikely. So the pogroms, the anti-Semitism that he's referring to here is almost certainly from Polish sources. Polish anti-Semitism up until the final solution was every bit as bad as German, if not maybe worse. So that's a distinction to be made here, because we're going to be sloppy with our history. And this would be Polish anti-Semitism. And yeah, let's continue. Not that I have anything against Polish people, but
had the people dig a grave and they shot them all, 300 people. If there is any people on earth who understands the danger of racism and white nationalism, it is certainly the Jewish people.
Right, so he talks about 300 people getting massacred. Israel does that all the time. I wonder if he will ever say anything about that. So white nationalism is, of course, evil here, but Jewish nationalism, unmentioned, right? Jewish nationalism is a thing. We have a Jew-centric, if not necessarily a Jew-only state in Israel. It's a Jewish state by definition. That's how they talk about it. That's why they praise it. It's a Jewish state. So white nationalism is bad. White nationalism is the worst thing ever. But a Jewish state, uh, or they don't say Jewish state, they say Israel, but that's what it means. That's what Zionism means, at least as it's come to mean. Again, I've pointed this out before. Zionism has a rich ideological history, and not every Zionist was a Jewish nationalist. There certainly were pan-Semitic people. There were people who kind of almost had near anarchic views or very, very voluntary views about Zionism. Those people existed, but they're not the ideology that won out. That's not who runs the state of Israel. That's not who primarily populates it ideologically. And when people like this are talking, they're not referring to that. They're referring to a Jewish-dominated, exclusively Jewish state. Right? It allows other people to live there, but they're second or third class citizens at best. Second class if they're Jewish Palestinian, or if they're Christian Palestinians. Third or fourth class if they're Muslim Palestinians. And it's just kind of interesting that white that a white state doing the same thing that Israel does is absolutely the worst possible thing that could happen. But a Jewish state doing those things bears little or no mention. Although there'll be a little bit of that here, which is interesting.
Semitism is on the rise because, not saying it wasn't there before, but now the stamp of approval has been given to hatred.
Bernie.
Okay, so she's probably right. She is right. There's always been anti-Semitism. It hasn't been given the stamp of approval. I don't know what she could possibly mean by that. Maybe this is the misreporting of, Trump said that there are good sides, good people on both sides, referring to the Confederate statue controversy that led up to Charlottesville. He explicitly said he didn't mean white nationalists. He condemned white nationalism repeatedly. I don't know if she just is unaware of that or just ignoring it. But the idea that Trump is anti-Semitic is just ridiculous. I mean, Trump's in his Jews in his family. He's been extremely pro-Israel. In fact, later in the video, they will kind of allude to that rather explicitly. So I don't know how he can be so pro-Israel, which they'll admit it in the same advertisement, and yet he's giving a stamp of approval to anti-Semitism. All right, and the stuff when they talk about the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States, it's really quite, oh, there's a synagogue that got vandalized in New York. Well, yeah, like I'm sure there's a lot of vandalism that happens in New York. So anyway, this will be
hatred.
Bernie recognizes that in his identity as a Jew, he sides with all other marginalized people. Bernie is the candidate who has been the most outspoken against the occupation and has been the strong.
Okay, I want to two things there. So his identity is a Jew. His identity is a Jew, and this is why she's supporting him, presumably. And on top of that, that he strongly identifies with marginalized people. So Jews are the allies of all marginalized people, but not hegemonic majority people. So white people, basically. If you're white, they don't. And it's funny. She looks really white. Like she's white. She is 100% white. She doesn't look like a Sephardic Jew. She's not a North African Jew. She's not, a Jew from Ethiopia. She's clearly an Ashkenazi Jew who's been in America and is completely white. And I bet no one in her family ever was allowed to marry anyone who wasn't white. Or if they was, it would have been a scandal. Based on the way she looks, that would seem to be the case. But anyway, it's good that it's a plus that he identifies with marginal groups, but not with the main group. And this goes right along, so marginalized groups are okay, but the big group is not. This fits right in with the Frankfurter School, the idea that you cannot have it. Jews can't be safe unless there is no homogenous or hegemonic society over them. So actually, this does get a little bit more interesting here. So
in saying that he would condition aid to Israel if they.
Let me go back a little bit.
Approval has been given to hatred.
Bernie recognizes that in his identity as a Jew, he sides with all other marginalized people. Bernie is the candidate who has been the most outspoken against the occupation and has been the strongest in saying that he would condition aid to Israel if they continue to annex the West Bank. There's a narrative around Jews being pro-Israel at any cost and not supporting Bernie because of his statements around Palestinians. I am excited about Bernie being a Jew who is using that identity to side with all other oppressed peoples.
Why is this happening? Why do we have a Jewish effort right now at this moment? There is a fight in the Jewish community. I don't sugarcoat it. We need peace in the Middle East. The Israelis need it. The Palestinians need it. To give
Oh, yeah. I'll keep going. This is good.
away to the far right of Israel by President Trump does nothing to help Israel's survival. It's nothing.
Okay, did the people who make this, did they say, hey, you just said that he gave a stamp to hate and anti-Semitism. Here's a video of Trump shaking Bibi Netanyahu's hand, and here's also the head of like your organization saying that he's giving a blank check. So he's giving a blank check to Israel. I guess you could say, well, he's giving a blank check to Likud, and these people are obviously not Likudniks. They're left-wing Jewish nationalists, but it's kind of interesting here. Well, let's keep. So he says, you know, there's a war within the Jewish American population. That's absolutely true. We are seeing a left-wing, right-wing divide within the Jews in America, especially among a couple issues. But this West Bank Palestinian issue is a big one, and I think that is interesting. I will give them credit for that. They're certainly not as bad as the Likudniks when it comes to that. But what's interesting is he says, you know, we need peace in the Middle East because it will be good for Israel and it will be good for the Palestinians. This is an election for the president of the United States. Now, I think I prefer there to be peace there, and I think it's in the United States' interest for there to be peace there. But it's interesting that in his mind, in this video, to get a candidate elected president of the United States, that what's good for America is not even mentioned. And actually, you will notice that's a theme in this video. What's good for America isn't one of the things they're talking about. What's good for Israel and what's good for Palestine because they're marginalized. What's good for marginalized people, who presumably, in their opinion, include Jews, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it's interesting. And it's just in his head. This will be good for Palestine. This will be good for Israel. Let's continue.
Help the Palestinian people. All it does is ensure more pain and suffering across the board. You have to put someone in his place who's going to stand up and speak truth to power. Someone who's willing to actually look at every human being as an equal human being. That's what Bernie offers. And that's what we, in the Jewish component of Bernie's campaign, are all about. What our foreign policy in the Mideast should be about is absolutely protecting the independence and security of Israel. But you cannot ignore the suffering of the Palestinian people. Immigration justice.
Okay, so the foreign policy of the United States should be absolutely to guarantee the existence, independence, and safety of the state of Israel, and the plight of the Palestinians should not be ignored. If that is seen as like a compromise or an egalitarian or a fair and balanced assessment of the situation, that's ridiculous. Because what he's saying is, if Israel, I mean, earlier they said, well, he'll set conditions. Well, what conditions? He's going to guarantee, apparently, it's 100% guaranteed of their security and their independence. All right, there's no condition there. That's unconditional. And then the suffering of the Palestinians just needs to be acknowledged. Okay, he just acknowledged it right there. So that's all he needs to do. So he can give Israel billions of dollars. He can do whatever they want. He'll with no strings attached. And he doesn't have to do anything for the Palestinians. He can just say, I acknowledge that you have a shitty deal. That's as far, like, his statement there does not imply anything more than that. So if we were to say, well, look, the absolute goal of white nationalists is to have a white nationalist nation state in the United States that has guaranteed security and guaranteed white nationalist place for the white people to be safe, and the suffering of colored people should be acknowledged. Would that not sound completely absurd and completely racist and completely one-sided? Oh, we will acknowledge. Now maybe they have in their head that there's more, that the Palestinian people deserve more than to be acknowledged that they suffer. And you know what? To be fair, plenty of Israelis over the years have not been willing to do that. And not just Israelis, many Americans too. You know, you'll have people like Golda Meir, who is a left-wing, you know, Zionist, socialist Zionist. She believed in labor Zionism and all this, but she said that Palestinians were a myth, that there was no such thing. And you have people like Alan Dershowitz quoting from books that just allege that there were no people in Palestine, you know, with such demographic authorities, as citing demographic authorities like Mark Twain. that they don't exist. So yeah, I guess this is a step up from the very lowest of the low. I mean, okay, you could have the lowest would be just to say the Palestinians are dogs and should all be killed, and then you have they get ignored, and then they have no, we acknowledge the what's happening to you, and then that's all below doing anything about it, right? And there's no promise here that he'll do anything about it. Israel's absolute right to exist is 100% its defense, blah, blah, its independence, right? So you can't set conditions and still have its independence. As soon as there's conditional, then its independence is contingent on the United States or no. So the idea then, this is good, and this is a good, that, oh, we're for marginalized people, we want to help marginalized people, but then this is our guy, we 100% want him because he's Jewish and we're Jewish and that our Jewish identity is so important. And look how great he is because he guarantees a Zionist Jewish state, and then he will acknowledge the plight of the Palestinians as if this is even remotely. And I don't think that these people are in their heads like conscious hypocrites where they hate the Palestinians. I think that they honestly have real feelings for the Palestinians. But what are they going to give them? What is Bernie going to give them? What friend of the Palestinians has Bernie been? But anyway, let's continue. This is almost done.
Racial justice, economic justice. These are Jewish values. We need to have conversations with our own community and the Jewish community to help people see Bernie Sanders is good for the Jews, it's good for all Americans, it's good for anybody whose communities are under attack.
I really do believe that Bernie is the candidate who can beat Trump. I'm excited for Jews for Bernie to keep mobilizing, and I'm excited for the older generation to join and really fully support Bernie.
I am very proud to be Jewish and look forward to being the first Jewish president in this country.
It's clear that the Jewish community is powerful, and when we show up for each other, amazing things happen.
Yes, the Jewish community is very powerful. It's very rich and it's very powerful as a group, as a cohort. If we're going to subdivide it, now are there people who are Jewish who are poor and who aren't? Yeah, absolutely there are. Non-powerful Jews, poor Jews. Yep, definitely exists. But as a group, if we're going to call them a group, yeah, and they've been in power, they've been in Congress, they've had influence, they've had tons of influence, disproportionately far more. Chinese Americans don't have that much influence. Arab Americans don't have that much influence. Right. African Americans probably don't have that much. I mean, the African Americans aren't dictating our foreign policy.
Like, we knocked 1,300 by say the incredible energy of our community will come together around Bernie, and we will help get our first Jewish president into the White House.
BernieSanders.com. So there you go. I think there's a lot of self-deception there. Like again, I said this in an earlier video. I think the culture of critique is just completely, I don't want to say red-pilled me, but someone else said it red-pilled me, but like I am now much more sensitive to this dynamic that's there. Now, there's a lot of stuff. Look, again, you want to be Jewish, that's fine. You are Jewish, you're proud to be Jewish, that's fine. But then to go and then try and say you want to be the president of the United States, but then your number one identifier is that you're Jewish and that your Jewish identity and that you believe in marginalized people and you want to say you're a marginalized person, but you also think that your ideas are the best ideas, that you're going to fix the world, that justice as you define it should be implemented everywhere. And they clearly even these left-wing Jews, and there are more left-wing. Like there are the Max Blumenthals and the oh gosh, I can't remember, Glenn Greenwalds of the world, who go much further and are much better on the Palestinian question, where they're not just ridiculous hypocrites, which is kind of what you're hearing here and what you hear from Bernie anyway. But yeah, fascinating. And she says they got 1,300, they knocked on 1,300 doors. Yeah, it's going to make a huge difference. They're going to have to do a lot more than that. It's also just very strange that he's a Nazi, he's enforcing hate and white supremacy, and then, oh, here's a video of him shaking Bibi Netanyahu's hand and writing a blank. They even say he's giving a blank check to Israel. Okay, well, that's some anti-Semite giving a blank check to Israel. there's many things you can say about Trump. There's many criticisms you can make about Trump. Saying he's anti-Israel or anti-Jewish just doesn't make no sense at all. There's just no basis for that. Um, if you want to say he gives a blank check to Israel, I think that you're right. He's also, that's not something that started with Trump. That's something that's been going on for a long time. There's been very little pushback against Israel over the years. There have been some presidents who were upset by them. Carter was upset with them. Reagan was upset with them. Since then, we really haven't seen. I mean, the last president who really, in a strong way, put his foot down was probably Eisenhower with the Suez Canal. But even Johnson let a Navy ship get blown up and destroyed, and hundreds of Americans killed, and basically didn't do anything about it. Covered it up more or less. So, blank checks for Israel is nothing new. It's not unique to Trump, and it's not unique to Republicans. And there's very little evidence that Bernie would be any better, based on his statement there. The independence and continuation of the state of Israel is unconditional, and its security as well. So I don't know what kind of conditions he would put on any kind of appropriations bill for Israel, but I'm going to guess that it'd be like probably none. I mean, and we just have to acknowledge the suffering of the Palestinians. Okay, meaning what exactly? Is he? Sounds like some of these people, maybe not everyone in this video has the same opinions about the West Bank and the settlements. Should they be disassembled? Should they be continued? Should they be? I don't know. So I don't want to speculate too much. But they're supporting a guy who that's the best you can say about the Palestinians is they should be acknowledged. Come on. So anyway, take of that what you will. I mean, look, I read a lot of Jews. I have Jewish friends. Like, it's great. But then there is this there is this and it's very common among a lot of groups out there to just have a bigotry. Like it's really unusual to have like a universalist thing where kind of everyone in the world is in some ethical sense the same, right? This is something that Christianity does. This I kind of think Islam does it to an extent, as long as you're a Muslim anyway. Maybe I don't want to get too much into that, but and a lot of Western societies feel this way as well. And Jews will say they feel this way, but they clearly don't, because their Jewish identity trumps any other identity. They want to retain that no matter what. So at least many of them, not all, but many of these. So I thought that was interesting. I know this is a hot topic, and there's lots of other stuff I could be talking about right now. I probably will do some more coronavirus stuff in the near future, but I just thought that I just could not make a video about it. So here we go. Let's count down until the ban.